Hello, my name is Zachariah Soa, and today we're going to be discussing the bones that make up the human skull, as well as addressing some other key features. We'll start up front with the frontal bone, and this bone consists of two portions, the squamous part and the orbital part. And you can't really see it on the model here, but the two sections are separated by the mectopic suture. And if you'll notice all around the skull, you see these little lines. These are all referred to as sutures. And cranial sutures are actually fibrous joints connecting the bones of the skull. The tissue that connects these sutures is made of mostly collagen, and even though they are joints, they are fixed, immovable joints. They have no cavity. Sometimes these are also referred to as synarthroses. Let's come around to the back. Here we have the occipital bone. It's a trapezoid-shaped bone at the lower back of the cranium. Houses part of the brain and is one of the other 7 bones that come together to form the skull. Here we're going to spin to the bottom side, and this large hole here is referred to as the foramen magnum, being the largest foramen of the skull, located here in the most inferior portion of the cranial fossa on the occipital bone. We're going to come to the side and take a look at the temporal bone. Temporal bones are situated at the side and the base of the skull. There's one on each side, left and right. The temporal bones are overlaid by the sides of the head, known as the temples, and house the structures of your ears. And being here, this is the external auditory meatus, or the ear canal, being a pathway that runs from the outer ear to the middle ear. Now we're going to come to the parietal bones. You have 1 and 2. The 2 large parietal bones are connected and make up the roof and the sides of the human skull. The 2 bones articulate to form the sagittal suture. In the front, the parietal bones come with the frontal bone on the coronal suture. And in the rear, we have this suture, which is known as the lamboid suture. Take a look at this side one. This here is the sphenoid bone. It's situated in the middle of the skull towards the front, in front of the basilar part of the occipital bone. The sphenoid bone is one of the 7 bones that articulate to form the orbit. And this bone here is the ethmoid bone, and the ethmoid bone comes from the Greek ethmos, and it's an unpaired bone in the skull that separates the nasal cavity from the brain. It's located at the roof of the nose between the 2 orbits. Here we have the zygomatic bone. You have 1 on each side, and they're the ones that come together to form the cheeks and the lateral walls of the orbits. They're commonly referred to as cheekbones or malar bones. Here we have the mandible, or the lower jaw. It's the bone that comes together, forms the lower part of the skull, along with the maxilla, the upper jaw, forms the mouth structure. Movement of the lower jaw opens and closes the mouth and allows for the chewing of food. As we just discussed, the maxilla, the bone that forms your upper jaw. The right and left halves of the maxilla are irregularly shaped bones that fuse together in the middle of the skull below the nose in an area known as the intermaxillary suture. Just there. And I believe during childbirth, when this fails to come together correctly, that's what results in what they call a cleft palate. Here at the very tip, I bet you can guess what this is. This is the nasal bone. And they're two small symmetrical oblong bones, each having two surfaces and four borders. They're positioned in the mid-face. At their junction, they form the bridge of the nose superiorly and anchor the upper lateral nasal cartilages inferiorly. This is the lacrimal bone, and it's perhaps the most fragile bone of the face and one of the smallest bones in the body. Spanning between the middle of each eye socket, each lacrimal is thin and scale-like and serves to support the eye. Alright, now we're trying to get in here. This is the vomer bone. It's one of the unpaired facial bones of the skull located in the mid-sagittal line. The bone forms the posterior inferior part of the nasal septum, which divides the nasal cavity. And that completes our use of the skull. If you're wondering, this little floating guy down here, this is your hyoid bone. Thanks for taking a few minutes to go through that with me, and we'll see you next time.